Have you ever heard the saying, "Don't listen to what people say, watch what they do"? Or this other saying, "In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way." When talking to people about what's going on, help them to understand that people cannot be as stupid as the men and women in the federal government appear to be, especially Biden. So let's look at his record. If you'd followed Joe Biden through his adult life, he is simply fulfilling what he has wanted for this country all along, and he has made no secret of it. In regards to Afghanistan, never in the history of man and warfare has a retreating army left food, equipment, and facilities for the advancing army to use. Never. It even gets to the point of a scorched earth policy. Nothing is left behind for the enemy to use. In the case of the Biden administration, they left everything: equipment, money, and facilities. Not only that, but they left our own people behind enemy lines. You cannot be that stupid. In the case of fuel for cars, trucks, and homes, you cannot shut down domestic pipelines and gas production and not see the price go up as the supply comes into short supply. Then, to alleviate the problem, beg OPEC and Russia to increase their supply of oil to us to make up the loss. You cannot be that stupid. You cannot propose spending in the trillions of dollars and then say it will not cost anything. A grade school child knows better than that. You cannot be that stupid. You cannot stop building the wall on the southern border and say that we welcome all to our shores, regardless of their status, even proposing paying them to come, and expect to have an immigration policy that not only allows a small amount of people to come into our country. You cannot look the other way when illegal immigrants come into the country and expect them to stop coming. You cannot be that stupid. The slogan of the Biden administration is "Build Back Better." Well, we were fairly well off until Biden came to power. We didn't need to build anything back. All we needed to do was to continue what we'd been doing. The slogan implies that we need to build back something when we do not need to. If the border policies of Trump had been continued, there would be no problem at our borders. If the energy policies of the Trump administration had been continued, we would not only have cheap energy, but selling it to the rest of the world. As to Afghanistan, well, every citizen understands that the opposite of what we did was what we should have done, and so on. There's a plan to all of this. You might say that one thing is stupid, but when everything is stupid, it becomes a pattern. It goes right back to the purported saying of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. And that's what we see going on. These are the plans of the Marxists coming to fruition before our eyes, and they intend to implement as much of their plans as possible before they may be voted out. Get the person to whom you are talking to thinking about these things. Get them to want to know more about what the plan is and, more importantly, how it can be stopped. Let them know that the Build Back Better agenda is actually a United Nations agenda and not the original idea of Biden. They can go online to any UN website and see that the Build Back Better agenda is embedded within the United Nations across the entire spectrum of UN action programs, especially their environmental program. At some point, people have to realize that what we are seeing is not stupidity, but a plan and treason. There are people who want this country to become socialist, then communist, under the control of the United Nations. This is the program that we are witnessing being played out, and we have to stop it. Get people to see that this is the case. Many believe that Republicans can solve these problems. By looking at history, that is not the case. Many would say that Trump knew enough about the deep state to battle them. Unfortunately, he did not know enough about them to defeat them. The same holds true for most Republicans in Congress. We have to educate more and more people as to the problems and the motivation behind them, and call it what it is: treason, and more importantly, conspiracy. As I said in last week's video, when dealing with a conspiracy, we have to watch our backs as much as we watch what's happening in front of us. Get people to understand that we're not only dealing with a conspiracy, but treason. The enemy is infiltrating organizations which are supposedly on our side, and this includes the Republican Party and certain so-called conservative organizations. The enemy's goal is for us to work for false solutions or to do nothing but talk about the problem. They want the opposition to just spin their wheels. Then there is the ignorance of history and the basics of Americanism that exacerbates the problem. You cannot solve our problems if you do not know our history. For instance, recently, the reputation of Frederick Douglass as an overall good guy has been touted across the conservative airways. Yet he was a traitor who had packed his bags to leave the country because he thought he would be tried and hanged for his crimes. Then he ran for vice president on a third-party ticket whose candidate for president was the leader of Section 12 of the Communist Internationale in New York City. It's all contained in this book, To the Victor Go the Myths and Monuments. Without naming names, this is the type of so-called history that's being fed to conservatives on conservative programs on the radio and television, because not enough people study the real history of our country. Again, in this case, it is necessary to look at the record rather than the rhetoric. And we have a lot of conservatives touting people who said nice things, but whose actions were the opposite, who talked peace but created violence. These type of people have long been part of our history, but the history books don't tell the story. It's important for people to know the truth, no matter how hard it may be to accept it. That being said, what it boils down to, there comes a time when people have to get involved, to take that responsibility if they intend for their children and grandchildren to live in a free country. We have to let people know what is really going on as nicely as we can. If you cannot get anywhere with someone, move on to someone else, because we need to increase the numbers who are involved in a national, concerted education program followed by action. If your time is spent on someone who will never step up to the plate, then move on to the other people. Build the base of activists in your area by getting them involved with the John Birch Society and our several action projects that can turn this country around.